And while they are passing the baskets, I'd like you to rise to your feet and welcome to the stage Brian Jamerson.
All right. Good morning again. All right. Well, as I said, Pastor Lanny and Pastor Jay are in the Ukraine, so I certainly do once again encourage you to keep them in your prayers. It's my pleasure to be able to fill in for them today. And today we will be talking about Heir School. This is about becoming an heir of God. This is about what it takes to become an heir of God and the process that we go through as part of that. Now, if I get the next slide. I couldn't help but notice the irony in the title, me and myself, and I thought it was really funny that there was a number of us standing at the back talking about the club that we were having and how we had a new member, we have an old face but a new head, Mr. Chris Freese. So the admonition that I was given many, many years back when this process started for me was no plugs, drugs, or rugs. You have to grow gracefully. All right, so this is about becoming an heir. And in this house, we have a really good grasp on what it means to be a son or a daughter of God. But I want to give a quick foundation for that in case you're new or in case you've forgotten, but just by way of introduction. As we can see from Romans 8, verses 14 through 17, the Bible says that we are sons of God and we are heirs of God. And if you're new to this as well, when it says sons of God, that's just the language of the Bible. There's other places that talks about that the boundaries between male and female being taken down. So if you are a female, if you're a woman in this house, this includes you as well. This is by no means exclusionary. We are heirs of God, children of God and heirs. And the next section talks about that if we are heirs, what it is that we're going to become, what it is that it means to be an heir, is not fully revealed in us yet. We are not yet what we will be. But this, from the next slide, is the hope that we were saved into. We have this hope. We have this blessed assurance that we are going to become something better. We are going to be a better version of ourselves. We are going to be the person it is that God is making us to be. So that transition, that process that we live here on earth is what I'm calling Heir School. So welcome to the class. So what are the things that get taught while you're in Heir School, this life that we have? Well, there are three things that I could really think about. And one of them is growing in love for God and for other people. Growing in love. Love is not something that we naturally do. It's certainly not something we naturally do well. We are very familiar with what is actually called lust in the Bible, which is the feeling of it. This intense feeling that you have. That's not really true love. The Bible just gives a definition of love. And none of the descriptors in 1 Corinthians 13, as it goes through the love is patient, love is kind, none of those are emotions. None of those are feelings. None of those are really even actions. They're decisionals. They're decisions that you make. And we grow in that ability to decide to love God and to decide to love people. Feelings follow actions, so it's very natural to have feelings as well. But the real love, the true love, is the decisions that you make. The next thing you're going to work on is character development. Character development is one of those things that you get to take with you into eternity. There's not much that goes behind the hearse as you're on your way to the cemetery, but your character development is certainly something that you're going to take with you. The person that you become is very thankfully not the person that you started off to be. And one of the last things that you have is stewardship. And stewardship is the one that I'm going to focus in on today. It's kind of funny that, back that up. So kind of what stewardship is really an aspect of your character development. But it's about making value decisions with limited resources that we have. We do not have unlimited time. We do not have unlimited money. We do not have unlimited ability to make relationships. So the value decisions that we make really reflect the person that we are. It shows the rest of the world. That's the next one. It shows the rest of the world who it is that we are becoming by being able to describe what it is that we value. And I think it's really interesting that, when we pass away, all these limitations go away. You step from the confines of time into eternity. You take, all the gold and the jewelry and the things that, that you've worked for and you've earned in your life here. God looks at that like a bucket of Quikrete. I mean, that's what he uses for pavement in heaven, according to the Bible. So that is why we have the limited resources now, is to be able to display our character. So I'm going to attempt from Scripture to make a case for this. This is kind of my introduction. So to do this, I knew that I needed a methodical plan, so I enlisted some expert help for this. So, oh no, Swiper just stole one of the fundamental tenets of my Christian conversion. How do I get it back? Who do we ask for help when we don't know which way to go? A map. All right, map. Map is going to help us go from the Great Commission. We're going to follow the path to the parable of the talents and 1 Corinthians 3. Say it with me. I have a lot of kids in my house. All right. So that was the introduction. You can start your stopwatches now. Christian living begins at the Great Commission. When Jesus was telling his followers how to live in this life and how to spread this good news that they had heard, the story that they had just witnessed unfold, he didn't talk about, if you believe in me, you'll be saved. He had talked about that earlier. They were familiar with that dynamic, but he did not mention that, didn't even cover it during his Great Commission. And why is that? Because he was not interested in offering option packages. This is not a choose your level of commitment and step into it. Jesus wants one level of commitment, and that is total commitment. This is, we kind of joke in Christian circles about that being fire insurance, being kind of a half convert. You came forward, you said a sinner's prayer with somebody, but you're still kind of living your life except for Sundays. That's a miserable place to be. If you ever have lived there or you know somebody like that, that's absolutely miserable because you're not getting the benefits of either world, but you have kind of the guilt and the draws of both of them. It's an unhappy place to be, and Jesus doesn't want you to have to be in that position. He is interested in having disciples. He is interested in having people that follow him with a whole heart. So this following him with a whole heart includes acknowledging the rightful place of God as owner of everything in your life and of you yourself. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, everything that fills it, is the Lord's." And it says it again, "the world, and all those who dwell therein." This doesn't leave much out. And there's some other verses up there as well. This is repeated in 1 Corinthians a couple places. Paul takes the same passage and repeats it twice. There's a number of other places in the Bible. This theme is throughout the Bible. God claims ownership on your life. So this can be an adjustment as you're thinking about, God being the owner. So I thought I'd give you a temporal analogy to kind of help out with this picture. Has anybody ever bought like a new house or a new car, your first 5-digit purchase, or maybe even your first 4-digit purchase, and you're so excited, you've got the keys, you've got something that has to have keys, and you're just so excited about that, and you're at home, and maybe you're driving your new car, or maybe you're enjoying the thrill of cutting your grass for the first time. I mean, it does fade after a couple tries, but you're enjoying this, you're having a great time, and then before a year goes around, you start to realize that you're not necessarily the owner of this. The government is. Because you have to pay them money for the privilege of owning this house or the privilege of owning this car. And if you don't think that's a worthwhile arrangement, if you don't agree to that arrangement, they're going to come and take your car or your house and give it to somebody that will. So even in these things that we feel like we are the owner of them, we have to acknowledge that there are other people that have a claim to it already. So we are, in fact, not the owners that we think we are anyway. We know that to be true in this world. How much less God's claim on what it is that we have. So if God is the owner, what does that make us? We are the steward. We are the steward of everything it is that God entrusts to us. So what is a steward? Just to be clear, so we can start this off right. I found this on the internet, so it has to be true, right? Dictionary.com defines the steward as somebody who manages another's property or financial affairs, one who administers anything as the agent of another or others. Okay? So we are God's agent here on this earth. He has entrusted a certain amount of things to us, a certain amount of money to us, the ability to earn money. He's given us a certain amount of time. He started us off with relationships. We have all of these things that are assets and resources for our lives for us to steward. There are two dangers, going back just a minute, there are two dangers of continuing to have an owner mentality. The first is that, I like to think of these like off-grid living people, these people that are out in the woods and they, if you go on YouTube and look up sovereign citizen, if you ever looked that up, these are people that try to get around the laws of the land by claiming sovereignty to us. The guys that barricade themselves and they're off ground and just defy the police to come in because they've decided that they don't have to pay property taxes, or the sovereign citizens that are immune to traffic laws because they are a sovereign citizen unto themselves. That never ends well. And YouTube has made a lot of videos on that. YouTube hosts a lot of videos about how it does not end well for them. That is a danger of feeling like you're still the owner. These people feel like they're the owner of themselves and they don't have to submit to the laws that are over them. Well, that doesn't go well. That's a danger of it. Another one is how you feel about loss. Okay, so let's imagine that you have just bought this new $1,000 phone. You just got it from the store. You're so excited about it. You haven't bought your case yet because you haven't made it to that store yet. And on your way to that store, you drop it and it shatters. How do you feel? You feel the loss. You are mourning this connection that you had with this device because of how much effort you had to put into it or how much money you put into it. You are mourning the loss. You are very sad. Take that scenario. Let's talk about a slightly different scenario. Your friend goes to the store, buys a $1,000 phone, and they haven't bought the case yet either, and they ask you to hold it while they go get the case. Okay? So you're holding this phone, and they come back with the case, they take it out of your hand, and they put it in your case. How do you feel now? That's the difference between how an owner feels and how a steward feels. The second instance, you're relieved. Whew, I'm off the hook. This is not something that I have to worry about anymore. It's good now. I don't have to worry about it. That's the mentality of a steward. How would you feel about things in your life being lost? Does your mood, like if you're heavily invested in it, does your mood go up and down with the stock market, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average? If it does, then you have the mindset of an owner. But if you have the mindset of a steward and you realize that this is all God's anyway and that you're doing the best you can with it, but in the end, it's God's. He gets to do with it what he wants to do with it. Then you have a much better frame of reference and your happiness is not tied to temporal things like this. So, with this background understanding of what a steward is and our call to stewardship and the place of stewardship in our lives, I'd like us to take a look at the parable of the talents. So, the parable of the talents has a lot of parallels with our life, and we can kind of see that as, right off the bat, that there's a master that's going away, and Jesus told this story as, to parallel himself, that he's the master that's going away. The servants are each given an entrustment, and it has to do with their abilities. How capable are they going to be of managing it? God doesn't want to give us more than what we're going to be able to handle, so we get just the right amount to be able to work with it. And then the servants are then rewarded or punished based on what they do with it. Based on their participation in this program, they get rewarded. Now, just kind of note here, the only servant in that did not get, that actually was punished for it, was one that decided to just not participate. Took the one talent and buried it in the ground and said, when the guy comes back, I'll give this back to him. I held it. I don't want to do anything with it. He was told to go multiply with it. He was told to go invest with it and to be about the master's work. But the one servant just did not want to do that. He just put it in the ground and ignored it, summarily ignored it. And that was a problem. Which brings us to one of the first key verses that I have found for stewards. So I have three verses that I call capstone verses. in this, we can see right at the end of the parable of the talents that to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, again, because they have not participated in, this is not talking about your bank account. This has nothing to do with your financial statement. This has nothing to do with a lot of the things that we would consider. It has everything to do with the equity that we have built in God's kingdom through what we have. Those that have not built in that, even what they have will be taken away because they have not chosen to be stewards of that. So applying the parable of the talents this way kind of makes it sound like that we're going to be judged. But Jesus said that we weren't going to be judged, right? Glad you asked. It does say that in the Bible. John 5:24 says that we have passed from death unto life, that we have escaped judgment, that we ourselves will not be judged. The parable of the talents was about our work as a steward and our recognition of God as the rightful owner of everything that's in place to us. It's our work as a steward that's going to be judged, not ourselves, but our work as a steward. And 1 Corinthians 3 talks about this. It talks about this judgment that's going to happen on our works, and it gives two conditions for success during this judgment. The first one is that the work that we do be based on the foundation of Christ. If we build on a different foundation, if we build on something else, then that doesn't really qualify for what God is wanting. The second one is having our works being able to stand the test of fire. And it talks about if we build with gold or silver or wood or hay or stubble, the fire is going to let it be known if that was something valuable or not. There is going to be a fire. There is going to be a crucible. There is going to be a testing in heaven of the things that we have done. And 1 Corinthians 3 describes the successful outcome as those that can withstand that fire. So from the call to lay up treasure in heaven that Jesus gave during the Sermon on the Mount, to Solomon's declaration in Ecclesiastes about how temporal works come to nothing and are futile and are meaningless, from one to the other, we can see that this call to stewardship and the rewards that come with it are throughout the Bible. This is a theme that is present throughout all of Scripture. But just the recognition of God as the owner does not bring success and does not guarantee that we're going to succeed in this. God has a rubric. God has a standard. God has a way of evaluating what it is that we do. And this is really kind of displayed or introduced really well while Jesus was in the temple with his disciples, and they were watching people give money. And they watched some people come up and put large bags of money into the treasury, and I'm sure the disciples were kind of oohing and awing about that. You can't help but wonder if these guys had gotten their money changed into pennies so that it would be louder in a bigger bag. But they were very likely in competition. Well, along comes this poor widow lady, probably dressed shambly. Nobody's really paying much attention to her, and she takes 2 little copper coins and plinks them in. That's the one Jesus is impressed with, not the former. This lady with her 2 copper coins gave more than everybody else. Well, that takes our understanding and puts it on its ear. I mean, that's really tough. How do you get your arms around that? There was this brings us to our next verse. We'll start with that one first. This brings us to our next capstone verse. And this was, for everyone to whom much is given, much is required. That little widow lady wasn't given much. She gave all that she had to live on, according to Jesus' words. He knew that by the Spirit, that this was her entire worth. This was all of her money. And she, out of a heart of love for God, wanted to see that given to the work of God and the temple and the people that were doing God's work, rather than to keep it for herself. And she, because she had little and gave all of it, she gave a higher percentage. She gave a better gift than the people that came in with the big bags of money. One of my goals today is to make this 20-minute sermon last 20 minutes. I have a tendency to make it last more like 5. I slow down, take a drink every now and then. I had a sailor one time that worked for me that was just a superstar within our command. He was doing great things. Everyone was super impressed with him. And we went on a deployment together, and I was in charge. And it came time for mid-cycle reviews, so I got to give a performance review of him, and he brought him into my office. And I let him know in no uncertain terms that he didn't impress me in the least, because I could tell he was coasting. He was capable of so much more. Like, we would go out on runs as a group, and he would be just sauntering along until somebody else came up, and then he would sprint ahead, and then he would just saunter along again. He was just coasting through life. He was capable of so much more than that. So I let him know in no uncertain terms that that was not impressive to me. And there was another guy that I pointed to. As a matter of fact, there were a couple others that were really struggling. They were doing their level best just to keep up with minimum standards. Those guys impressed the socks out of me, because they were working hard, they were committed. I knew where their heart was going to be, and I know where this guy's heart was, and it wasn't in the right place. I was thoroughly impressed with their heart, and I was thoroughly disgusted with his, because he was coasting. He was capable of so much more. And God looks on it in a very similar way. He knows what he's entrusted to us because he knows what we're capable of. And God evaluates us based on that. This is not, I don't look at this as a way to say, oh no, I'm not up to snuff. I look at this myself as a great comfort, because I am aware that in many areas of my life, I am not the 5-talent servant. I am the 2-talent servant at best. My talents and my abilities are not the peak. You know, you can look around, you can look on YouTube and see all these people that are just awesome. You see these polished moments. And they're at their best. You're thinking to yourself, wow, I wish I could talk like that. Wow, I wish I could, drive a car like that. Whatever it is that you have your heart on, know that the talents that you have and what you have, that's your ability. If you wish that you had 3 hours of time in the morning to give to God, but you have to get up and go to work, and you have these other pressures, and you have the widow's next door's lawn to mow, and this to do and that to do, God does not evaluate you on not having spent that 3 hours with him in the morning. He takes a look at what time you have available and how you choose to spend that. What is the time that you have after all your commitments are done? And how do you choose to spend that time? That is how God evaluates us as stewards. So, getting back to God's grading scale, if I acknowledge God as owner and I work hard, now am I going to succeed? The answer is still no, unfortunately. This next one I think is it's humorous to me. But in the days of Isaiah the prophet, the Israelites were fasting, but they weren't seeing the results that they wanted to see from their fasts. They were doing the wrong actions. And if you've ever read through this, if you get down to, if you verse 4, the second paragraph there, indeed you fast, but for strife and debate, and to strike with fists of wickedness. I like to call these the fist-fighting fasters. If you've ever spent much time fasting, you know what this is about. You can start to get angry. Hangry is the word for it, I believe is used now. It's a real thing. It's a thing. So day 1 is pretty bad. Day 3 is pretty bad. Day 2 is not much better, and then it gets on from there. But it can be rough. These people were doing the right thing. God had called them to times of fasting. They had times when they were supposed to fast. God had said that they should fast. They should use this as a time to be introspective, to cleanse themselves, to get your spirit back in charge of your flesh, which is kind of what fasting does. That's the benefit for it, and it's why it's so painful. It's because your flesh talks really loudly. And it screams for food. It hurts everywhere. Your brain hurts because you haven't had any sugar or caffeine or whatever it is. You're really missing the carbs. Whatever it is, this is to get your spirit back on top of your flesh. But if you don't allow that to happen and your flesh just stays in charge, then you're going to be a fist-fighting faster. You're going to be angry too. It takes a lot of effort to do that. But that's one of the things that God said was required. Their fasting was not meaningful to God. He was not impressing him at all because they were choosing to indulge their base desires. They were choosing to be mean, to allow that to continue while they were supposed to have this holy set-aside time to God. So that was that was something where their sacrifice turned up meaningless. And as somebody that's like a borderline foodie, that's like really scary to me because I really thoroughly enjoy eating. and I really don't like it when I'm not eating. And I really want my not eating to mean something. And so there have been many times during a fast, I'm like, oh God, please don't let this be meaningless. I don't want to be one of those Isaiah 58 fasters. Please let this count for something. So that is one of the ways, by doing wrong actions, by things that go against God's heart, we can discredit the work that we're doing. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul tells us of another surefire way to discredit our stewardship work. And you might be familiar with this, but do you have love in your heart? If you don't, then your gift has become an irritating noise, it's become irrelevant to those you're giving it to, and it's completely worthless, all without love, just by having the attitude of your heart. You know, if you've worked with kids at all, you can kind of know that you can get them to obey, but you working on that attitude, that's the next level. You know, but that's the way God is with us. The actions are important, but so is our heart attitude, because this isn't about the actions. This is about the heart attitude. To unpack this a little bit, if you have love in your heart for God, but you're really struggling with the people part of it, that's still love. If you see somebody and you just reach out in a heart of compassion, you see somebody that's suffering and you, out of compassion, do something for them, do something to ease their suffering, that is a heart of love. If you feel compelled to do something, if you don't want to do it, but you feel like you can't say no, or you just really want to look kind of holy in front of the other people, like the Pharisees that Jesus continuously mocked, then that's the love of self, and I don't think that one counts. It's love for God. It's love for people. It's this supernatural love in our hearts. I said before it wasn't a feeling, but if you have that feeling in your heart and you don't act on it, or if you rephrase that, if you do act on it, that's a heart of love. That's a decision of love. That is a feeling of love. That is you acting out of love. And it's very important that we act out of love. This brings us to our third stewardship capstone. Yay, point 3 of 3, lunch is soon. It's time to start your post-service to-do list if you haven't already. So this is faithfulness. This one is about being faithful. It's important in a steward that you be faithful. Faithful to what? Well, the point of being a steward is to manage something for somebody else. And so you have to be faithful to everything it is that God has called us to. That's what's important in being a steward. Otherwise, you're kind of trickling into being an owner. This even applies to the part of what we have that we use as provision. A certain amount of our money, a certain amount of our time is just used for us to sustain life on this earth. And God has intended it to be that way. But even in those decisions, we have to keep what we have and what we do and who we are submitted to God. In school, tests are kind of a mixed bag. You know, if you've ever been to a really tough class, I mean, you learn the concepts and you really hope that you're going to get it right and that the professor doesn't throw you a curveball or the teacher doesn't throw you a curveball. I was in a class one time and the professor was handing out papers and I got an 18. I got an 18 on this test, and it was one of my core classes in my college major, and I'm like, oh. And as he's passing out the tests, I'm sitting here rethinking my life. You know, this class is only offered once a year, so I'm going to have to spend a whole nother year in college because there is no way to make this average up to anything passing. So then he goes up and he puts his overhead slide on because that's how old it was. And my 18% was an A. If you ever become a college professor, please don't do that. Congratulations, you're smarter than the 19-year-olds. Thankfully, the test of our works is not like that. You do not have to worry about being thrown a curveball. Sure, we do grow love and we do grow in understanding as we go through life, but we do not have to guess at what the standard is. So we can pray that God increases our love. We can certainly ask for that. And the Bible says in James 1:5 that we can ask for more wisdom, more understanding. But God also speaks about pursuing wisdom. Wisdom is a pursuit of our life. I like this verse from Ecclesiastes I read in my quiet time a few mornings ago. He who digs a pit will fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. If you quarry stones, you can be hurt by them. If you split wood, you're going to be endangered by it. If the axe is dull and no one sharpens it, then you're going to have to use more strength. But wisdom brings success. So, it's very consistent with Ecclesiastes, all these horrible things happening. I said in a previous sermon that I consider it the country music chapter of the Bible. It is so depressing in so many spots, and this verse is no exception to that. But the redeeming part of it and how it made the cut today was that last line. Wisdom brings success. Solomon had found that all these nasty, bad things can happen, but if you take understanding and you apply it to what's going on, you're not going to fall into the hole. The serpent's not going to bite you when you break through the wall. The stones aren't going to fall on you, and you're going to remember to sharpen the axe before you go back out. You're going to have success. You're not going to weary yourself or get injured if you apply wisdom to it. And God has given this to us. So does this all sound daunting? Kind of this whole God's value system is not the same as our value system, and it's really kind of a standing on its ear, and how can anyone pass this test? Well, without wisdom, this would be incredibly daunting. But we have to learn through this whole thing that God is after our heart. This is not about performance. This is not about what you do. This is not about getting a bigger or better mansion in heaven. This is not about taking your ambitions and applying it to the kingdom, although I don't necessarily think that's wrong. I think that's the highest place you can set your ambitions. This is about learning God's heart. This is about taking God's value system and making it my value system. The Bible talks about there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is destruction. When we are born, we have this nature. We see the things in the world that are going on. We see how the world spends time. We see how they spend their money. We see what they set their affections on. And that seems like the way we're supposed to go. This is what we do here in America. This is what we do here in Afghanistan. This is what we do in South Georgia. Wherever it is that you are, this is what you kind of take on. God is calling you into a new culture. God is calling you into a new kingdom. You are not citizens of Maryland. You are not citizens of the United States, first and foremost. You are citizens of God's kingdom. And he is desiring to bring you into the image of Christ. And a big part of that is reflecting his value system, allowing your values to change to reflect his values. And when you do that, then stewardship is easy. It's easy to care about the person next door. It's easy to care about the person in your office. It's easy to know what to do with your time and your money. Sure, you still need some Xbox time. Everybody does. I do. I'm projecting myself on you. I need Xbox time. I need time to myself. I need time to relax and to recoup. Everybody does. But if that's 50% of your time usage, if that's 12 hours out of your day and the other 12 are sleeping, then you might be missing the mark a little bit and not stewarding well what it is that God has given you. So we often think about stewardship equaling frugality. I'm frugal. Frugality is where you spend the least amount of money. But stewardship has a completely different take on it. Frugality is almost antithetical to true stewardship, because true stewardship is not spending the least amount of money. It's not spending the least amount of time. It's spending every second well. It's spending every penny well. So let's give an example of this. So you consider you have somebody that's like really time conscious. They're in a hurry, or they're wanting to make the most of their time. And so in their business dealings, they always kind of get right to the point. They get the things taken care of. They conduct the transaction as quickly as they can, and they beat feet on. They have missed, if that's a steward, if that's a child of God, they have missed the opportunity to develop a relationship. The relationship is there, but they have not invested in it. They have not matured it. They have not brought it to the place where it could be something useful in God's hands. The person has not developed this on behalf of the owner. The Bible talks about generous people finding ways to be generous. This is found in Proverbs, one of the biggest wisdom books in the Bible, and certainly something I would encourage you to read often, if not daily. Being frugal is not wrong, but it's not the same as being a good steward. Okay, so kind of getting to the so what of this, which means we're wrapping up and you can seriously start thinking about lunch plans. What is it that we're driving at here today? What is the point of all of this? What should I take out of this? What should I do? Well, I would encourage you to begin thinking about your daily decisions. One at a time, not all at once. This is not some fierce introspection. This is just considering, why did I come to church today? What was the point of coming to church today? Because if you don't understand the point of it, then you won't understand what you're supposed to do while you're there. And you could miss the whole point of being here. If you think that the point of church was to come in and hear some songs and listen to an excellent sermon, I unfortunately missed the point. The Bible talks about this, but it's not these things. It does not talk about going and hearing certain songs or singing along as a group, although those things all have value. There is a higher point to why it is that we choose to gather together. Why is it that you go to lunch? Why is it that you do your work? Why is it that you do anything it is that you do? Continue to look at those things and find God's purpose in it. Find God's value system. Line it up with God's value system. And then you'll know that you're going to be the happiest because you're not the owner, you're the steward. I don't ever want to get to heaven and realize, oh wait, I was supposed to be loving those people. I should have acted out of love towards those people, and this would have been so much different. I really think about the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan was the third person to come along, but the first person was a priest, and the second person was a Levite. These were people that were traveling this road, and they were doing God's work, and they totally missed the point. They did not know why. They missed the why that they were doing God's work. They didn't get that, and so they became the brunt of the story. And I don't ever want to be that place. I want to remember why I'm doing what it is that I'm doing, because that's how I can be effective for God. That's how I can grow into the image of Christ, and that is my best future. All right, time for recap. Did you notice that map's gone and Jesus is there? Okay. All right. God wants us to be fully committed. We start at the Great Commission and we see that God wants disciples. He does not want converts. He does not want adherents. He does not want admirers. He wants disciples. At the parable of the talents, we see that God is the owner of everything, and we have a high and lofty role of being a steward of what it is that God has given to us and what he's put into our entrustment. And from 1 Corinthians 3, we find the cheat sheet for the final exam. By pursuing wisdom in this area, we can maximize our efforts. All right. We are getting to the close of the service now. Louise, if you'd like to come, we have something from the prophetic group today.
Good morning. Two things. First, there was an image of a container of peppercorns, the little black things that get ground up and you get pepper from. The Lord wants to let you know that if you feel like you're just one of the little peppercorns lost there in the jumble, he knows exactly where you are. And a peppercorn to be shared has to go through the grinder, gets crushed, and then it brings a little heat to life. And so if you are somewhere either being ground up or bringing a little heat to life, you are okay. The other thing that I personally saw was, it was like someone had all these receipts. I've been to the grocery store and I've got this. I went here and I have this. I have this debt. I have this bill. I have this stack of bills and receipts. And they would go to the Lord and the Lord would say, but I've paid for everything. And they'd be like, but wait, I found another one. Or I have this debt in my heart. I have this sin against this person. I have some bill. I have some debt. And I think because of that, this is the one, then maybe God will say, you've reached your max. This was a 20 checkout line only kind of thing. And the Lord is saying, I've already paid for everything. Everything you need, everything you've done, everything you've thought, everything you've failed to do or that sort of thing. He's already paid for you and everything you are and everything you do with his son, his blood, his life. He's paid for it all already. So quit hanging on to your little stack of receipts. Let him go, because the Lord isn't charging you debt by debt, paper by paper, action by action. It's done already.
If anybody's ever been in a place where they had a job to do that they really did not feel qualified to be at, and you're not good enough for what it is that's being asked of you, that's a miserable place to be. It is a miserable place to be if you feel like you have to pay for your sin. And it's a wonderful thing to know that we don't have to. If you are under the weight of that, or if any of these words spoke with you and you'd like prayer about that, I would encourage you to come forward. If I could ask our ministry team to come forward as well for pray with people. If you have not started that Great Commission life, if you have not accepted Jesus as the Lord of your life and accepted him as the payment for your sins, I certainly encourage you to come forward today and make that right with God. Don't leave this place not having that right with God. If there's anything else in your body that hurts, or you'd like prayer for situations or things going on, please welcome to come pray. We'd love to pray with you about that as well. If you're a first-time guest, I will be meeting with you in our hospitality room, which is the door on the left as you begin to exit the building. Otherwise, I pray that you have a wonderful day. There's a class sign-up sheet in the lobby. Please take an information sheet and sign up for one of our classes that are coming up. Lord bless you guys. You're dismissed.